All right.
How's it going?
Yeah, good. I put a hat on to show that time has elapsed since the last episode we did.
Fair. Okay.
Because we always wear the same thing, so video viewers might think that this is all one session.
Yeah, so there needs to be something. Each time we jump on, there needs to be something that's different.
Some different accessory.
Yeah. Maybe if we could put some kind of AI background behind you that changes and looks like seasons, goes through the seasons every time. That'd be ideal. So it's like snow now would be good, I think.
Yeah, like Lo-Fi Girl. You know,
exactly like Lo-Fi Girl, yeah.
That's a deep reference. Anyone who gets that, fair play.
If you get that one, then yeah, drop a comment. But look, episode 3, welcome back, everyone. If you listened to episode 1 and 2 and you came back, fair play.
Yeah.
We must have done something right, or you must be really stupid.
It's really bored.
Or just really bored, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that guest is back that is listening to us in the bath still. I wonder if they've gone. Yeah, so episode 3, I think we are just going to kind of keep this lighthearted, do the same kind of thing every time. We'll pick a subject and we'll talk about it. We'll give you a hot take. And then as this thing gets better, there'll be more things that we can do and introduce.
Yeah, I should say, by the way, we pretty much do these in one take, but there's a decent chance that my dog will interrupt the podcast at some point because she's just on one today. I don't know what's going on with her, but if that happens, there might be a harsh edit that's needed, Jamie.
Yeah, maybe a harsh edit, or maybe we can just bring her to the camera and shame her in front of the of the small audience that's watching. Okay, cool. So what do you want to talk about today?
I think open rates is a good topic because whether this is sensible or not, everyone points to their open rates as the main measure of whether their email is successful or not. And so we will talk about whether open rates is actually a good reflection of how successful your emails are. And we'll also talk about how to improve your open rate and what sort of measuring stick you should be using when assessing if you have a good or a bad open rate.
Nice.
So a fair summary?
Absolutely. Open rates today then. Perfect. And before we do that, I want to point some attention to your hat because it's not often that you wear hats, actually. It's mostly when you're having a bad hair day that you're wearing a hat.
Which I am, by the way.
Okay, fair. Is that the main reason? Or is
no.
To mark the passage of time is reason 1?
Yeah, I would say that's the marking the passage of time is the public reason number 1. The private reason is that this is free swag that I received, and I was hoping that you'd ask about it so that I could talk about the fact that because I very rarely get free swag. You know, you go to events more frequently than me, and you might pick up a pen or a notepad or maybe a tote bag or something like that. I very rarely benefit from that culture of free swag, but I did get sent this hat from Beehive, which is an email service provider similar to MailChimp, I guess. Beehive is a relatively young company, so they've got plenty of swag to give away. And it's great. I've got a t-shirt on the way as well, so I'm going to be fully dripped in Beehive gear, and it says occupy inboxes, which is quite cool, kind of aligned, isn't it, to our mantra. So
yeah, I mean, it's both inbox, email marketing.
Are you jealous?
I am a little bit. I wouldn't say I'm seething, but I'm kind of simmeringly jealous. I mean, free swag at events and stuff is kind of one of my main metrics for success when it comes to business development for the Inbox Club.
Yeah, like how heavy is your bag when you leave that venue?
Exactly, yeah. You know, despite getting there for free sometimes from a partner or a sponsor, you know, if I'm coming away with a heavy bag of swag, then I'm kind of net up for the day.
I remember when we went to the AC conference recently and it had Tony's Chocolonely. That was big. That was pandemonium.
Yeah, it was pandemonium. And actually, I mean, we came away with arms full of Tony's Chocolonely.
I didn't want to say that in public, but yeah, we did.
Yeah, it was in my fridge for months.
We resold it, made a fortune.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. MailChimp swag was pretty good. I didn't go to that one, but yeah, I brought some back for the team.
Yeah,
shared it
yeah,
out.
that was good. I
Yeah,
think it's the measure of how successful a business is, as to how good their swag is. There's a direct correlation there. So
yeah,
Beehive must be doing pretty well because this is corduroy. It's nice.
yeah.
I'd wear this.
And for someone who's like ordered company merch recently, it's expensive as well.
Yeah.
So hats off
Well,
or hats
in this
on.
case, hats on.
Hats
Yeah.
on, yeah. Okay, nice. Look, let's stop talking about company swag, otherwise we'll take up the whole episode.
Yeah, that's a different app.
It is a different app. Okay, so open rates, let's talk about that. Why or why not are open rates so important?
So open rates are a nice measure to use if you are comparing your open rates to your previous open rates. I think the big error that people make is that they will Google open rate benchmarks and they'll see a number, and then they will make an assessment that either they're doing really, really well or really, really poorly. Both of those scenarios are probably not true. They might be true, but the likelihood is that you're doing fine. But you should be using your old open rates, your open rates since you've been sending emails, as your measuring stick. The main reason why you can't use industry benchmarks as a reliable indicator of how good or bad your open rates are is that open rates are obscured by, well, various things, but most famously Apple's privacy protection. I don't know the technical term for it, actually. Is it Apple's privacy?
Is it MPP, isn't it? It says mail privacy protection or something. Yeah, that's the policy.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. And MPP is there to give false signals to platforms like Beehive or MailChimp, whatever platform you're sending your emails from, to say either this person did open when in fact they didn't, or occasionally telling your email service provider that this person didn't open when in fact they did. So it obscures those opens, and as a result, the open rates that are reported are often significantly skewed. Now, to what extent they're skewed is a topic of debate that we probably shouldn't dip our toes into in this podcast. The headline for listeners to take here is that they definitely are skewed to some extent. And we're now at a point where most platforms, including MailChimp as of recently, are reporting your open rates with MPP included and excluded. So you can now see what your open rates look like when MPP is completely ignored.
Okay, you covered quite a lot there. So I'm going to break down a couple of those things very quickly. If we put aside MPP for now, and Apple's privacy protection policy, the first thing you touched on there was about benchmarking, right? And benchmarking yourself against what you might Google, or what might come up as a benchmark on your email platform. And I guess if we do that, it's kind of similar to, I went to the gym this morning, believe it or not. I managed to track myself out.
You did? Oh, well done.
And it was kind of like me going down there and judging my biceps compared to everyone else in there, right? When what I should be doing is comparing the size of my bicep to the size of my bicep last week. Is that what you're saying for benchmarking?
A perfect analogy.
Okay.
Only your biceps, I presume, shrink, whereas we're hoping that the opposite will happen for open rates.
Yeah.
So yes, that's exactly right. And I think, but I think to add to that, not only are you making a mistake if you're comparing your biceps to others in the gym, but imagine that you're seeing those biceps only in the reflection of one of those weird bendy mirrors that makes them all look much bigger than they actually are when you see them for real. And I think that's to extend your weird gym metaphor a little bit further, I think that's the reality of what you're doing when you're comparing your open rates to industry benchmarks, is that not only is that sort of unfair on you and not necessarily representative of like the wider population, but that also even those metrics that are reported in benchmarks are probably mistaken because of MPP.
Okay. despite your insistence about talking about MPP, I'm going to park that still for a second. And I want to talk about, because listeners to this will want to come away with something tangible, right? And we'll always make an effort to do that where we can. Someone might ask, well, what's a good open rate? And I know we just talked about not benchmarking, but when we look at email accounts, we will look at it and say either your open rate needs improvement or it's in a good place, right? So if we're going to ballpark some figures here about, okay, well, if you're in this region, no matter what industry you're in or what kind of business you are, it's bad. And if you're in this region, it's okay. Do you have a figure for that?
Yeah, I suppose for the purposes of this question, I think 30% is usually where I draw that line in the sand. And it's so relative, so it's a difficult one to be categorical on. But I would say if you've built a list responsibly, full of people who are opted in and expecting to hear from you, then you should be expecting a minimum of 30% open rates. Where we see accounts consistently not reaching 30% is where they the contacts on their list might not know that they're on the list, for example, and the emails that they're sending might be going to spam folders, etc. So I would say anything below 30% is not a complete worry. I mean, nothing that we say here should cause worry. We're talking about emails after all. But that would be where I would be thinking seriously, okay, how am I going to improve these? Is that fair, Jamie? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And then if we're looking at someone who's in the 40 to 60% open rate range, we're thinking, okay, these guys are in a really healthy place when it comes to open rates.
That's nirvana.
And then when you're talking about open rates of 60 plus, then we start to get a bit more specialist in maybe that's gone to a segment that's really specific. Maybe the segment is quite small in sample size. Or it's, we did one of our best campaigns. I think the open rate was like 92.5, right? And that was because everyone was expecting the release of our playbook and that email, and they'd pre-registered for it. So, specialist campaigns will obviously get much higher. And when you're looking at your overall open rate, you might want to not count campaigns like that because it will have skew the metrics. No, I think that's fair. So that's nice that we've kind of given people something tangible to kind of look at their score and think about. But let's talk about Apple's privacy protection policy, whatever it's called now. So you talked a little bit earlier about these platforms will allow you to tick a box that will either include or exclude opens from devices that have this setting activated. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah,
Correct.
not every platform, by the way, but
No.
more and more.
More and more. And so an example recently is MailChimp. We had this with a client where we did a reporting session last week. And by ticking and unticking this box, the open rate would swing from about 40 to 43% down to about somewhere between 16 and 20%. So it's quite a hefty swing. And in this case, it's a swing that takes someone from the plus 30% that you mentioned there into the minus 30% that you mentioned as well. So if someone is confronted with that situation, what do we want to say to those people?
Yeah, I think there's two things here. The first is that when we uncheck that box and we see this much more pessimistic outlook that's sat in front of us, what we should remember is that is the most pessimistic of outlooks. That excludes all of this MPP data, some of which will be legit. So one thing that I always remind clients is that email service providers are not data companies. They are not specialists at being able to tell you categorically who has opened and who hasn't opened. So all they can really tell you is, all they can really report on when we uncheck that box is, these are the absolutely verifiable opens. But there may be plenty that they can't verify, but that are still legit opens. And so what I firstly like to do is take that unchecked box amount of 40% or whatever it is, and take the unchecked, which let's say for this example is 20%, and draw a line somewhere in the middle. And that is quite approximate. And unfortunately, that's the world that we live in now. Well, depending on your outlook in life, unfortunately, as an email marketer, that's the world that we live in now. We have to draw rough lines. We can't make categorical assessments. However, we can make far more concrete assessments when it comes to our other metrics. And so, key theme for this podcast, I think, is to not treat your open rates in isolation, but rather to combine them with other engagement metrics, primarily your click rates, because clicks are not obscured by MPP. They can still be obscured by bots. And just last month, Beehive released a new feature, which means you can now look at verified clicks as opposed to just click totals. And they are clicks from humans as opposed to bots. And I think their criteria for determining that is how quickly it takes for an email to get a click. So if it's within the first 5 seconds of sending it, for example, it's considered a bot. So maybe even then you have a couple of super enthusiastic readers who slip into that botnet, but it's pretty reliable. But it's a small margin, right? It's a small margin. We're not talking about the same sort of swings that you get for MPP. And so click rates are far more reliable as a metric. And when we use those in unison with open rates, that's when we start to paint a really accurate picture of who's reading our emails, who's looking at them, how many people are actually engaging. It's that classic thing, Jamie, isn't it? And we've come across it time and time again where a client is getting, say, a 50% open rate, and they're like, nobody ever clicks on anything though. Like, I don't get it. Why aren't people? I'll ask for a reply and nobody ever replies. And there's a whole host of reasons why that might be, but I think a big one is that sometimes people overestimate how many humans are actually looking at their emails. So have I summed that up well? Have I missed something there?
No, you have. In classic Copeland fashion, you've summed that up very well. Not succinctly, but very well. And I think that's your kind of classic
classic me, yeah.
But, I think you're right. And I guess when we factor in that, when we aren't quite sure that what we're reading is correct with these stats, because, these companies aren't data companies and they're doing the best they can to kind of verify the data. When we consider all of that and, MPP as well, it kind of reinforces the importance of setting your own benchmark and to compare your performance to your previous performance and not compare yourself to what you might Google, etc.
Exactly. But let's talk about, Jamie, a scenario in which, okay, I've done all of that. I've looked at my click rates. They're quite low. Nobody's really replying to my emails. My open rates are probably somewhere between, let's say, 15 and 40%. I want to improve. I want to get better because there's always room for improvement, right? If you're in that scenario, what's the first thing you're looking at?
So in terms of wanting to improve open rate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, where do we start? I think the first thing that we always think about when we look at poor open rates is the quality of the email list first. So where is the data come from? Who's on that list? How is the list sourced? All of those things, because good email performance starts there. And you could be sending the best content in the world and following all of the best practices, but it will still fall flat if the audience isn't right. That's kind of my first go-to. What would you say?
Yeah, no, I like where your head's at, because I think the natural place to start is subject lines. And I think a lot of people would start there because that is the most front-facing part of your email. I think you described it as like your shop front in a newsletter that we sent, where that's the display that will get people through the door. But I agree with you. Yeah, I think that people really overlook the quality of their list. And you mentioned earlier in the episode about how we've sent emails before that have had 80, 90% open rates. And that hasn't been because we've had this incredible subject line or like we've hacked the preview text so that everyone opens. It's because we sent to a small group of people who were expecting to receive it and knew what they were going to get when they clicked as well, which was a free list growth guide. And so I would say, yeah, that is absolutely essential. Go on.
Yeah. I think you kind of compared the subject line to a shop front, right? And so if we think about the audience, it's almost like taking a step back from shop front and thinking, well, where have I set my shop up? You know, is it on the high street? High street is a bad analogy, actually, because high streets aren't what they were. But is it in somewhere that's got high footfall, or is it kind of at the back of an industrial estate somewhere that no one ever goes past, you know?
Can you do another bicep analogy, please? I could only understand bicep analogies. I'm only joking.
You put me on the spot now.
No, I'm only joking. No, I think that's perfectly put, actually. Yeah, there's also, I guess, like, I'm going to extend this metaphor into somewhere slightly uncomfortable now, but one point that I do want to raise here is that if you have a reputation for sending good emails, then that's also really, really important. It's a bit of a fluffy one because it's not something that a listener could immediately improve. But there's definitely something to be said about building a reputation for sending high quality emails. And if you do that, to bring it back to your shop analogy, Jay, you might be in the wrong place. You might have a really ugly shop front. But if you're super well known, probably a restaurant is a better example, actually. You know, sometimes you get those shitholes, like, but they're known for being really, really nice.
Yeah.
They've got like incredible food, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you don't want a shithole. You probably rather your shop front looks good, but sometimes you can get away with even having a bad subject line. Sending it to an audience isn't necessarily, you know, like your hasn't been cleaned every month and, you know, hasn't been looked after particularly well. But because you send really good stuff, people who are on your list know what they're going to get and expect a certain level of quality.
Yeah, I know those restaurants you mean as well. And they're usually like, they kind of look like the foyer for a multi-story car park, right? It's kind of like tiled floors. There's no mood lighting. It's just main light on and that's it.
Big lights.
And the waiting staff can't wait to not serve you either. It's, you know, that kind of stuff. But they know the food is great and they know that the, you know, their reputation, they're relying on that a little bit. But for a lot of people, it is easier. We're really running with this metaphor now. It is easier to set up a good shop front in a good location than it is to build that reputation for serving great food.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes, you know, it's ideally you want to do all of them. But you know, you've kind of got to pick where you're at, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah. And if you have up until this point been treating your email list as like sort of the waste bin for the stuff that doesn't make it onto LinkedIn, it's not too late to change that either. You know, you can start building that reputation now. Don't feel like just because I've been sending out drivel for the last year or you know, not sending at all, that nobody's going to want to come to my restaurant, because that's the beauty of a great shop front, is that, you know, they can dress it up so it looks like a completely new shop.
Yeah.
Let's end that metaphor now.
Yeah, the metaphor's finished now.
We can't use that anymore. We've really flogged it to death.
Let's draw a line in the sand. Okay, so we covered a few things there. We covered the quality of the list that you've built, the audience that you have. We covered your reputation for sending good content. You touched very briefly on kind of subject line and preview text, and I want to throw the from name as well in there.
Yeah.
So we've kind of got two camps of stuff here, right? We've got stuff that we can do right now and stuff that we have to work towards over a longer period of time. And so if we look at those two camps, what is the impact that those two camps will have on our open rates separately? How big an impact can we expect?
Yeah, so I would say that if we look at that sort of front-facing stuff like open rate, from name,
subject line, you mean, and from name?
Subject line, preview text, from name, etc. Those things will have an impact to some extent. It's very difficult to measure exactly what impact they have email to email, because obviously depending on when you send the email might also impact the open rate. There are lots of variables, and so attributing it to, it's because I mentioned this word in the subject line is quite challenging. But we can use testing. We can see that. I mean, we've done tests for clients before where we've seen like a 7 or 8% difference in open rates based on the wording that we've used in a subject line, for example, or the from name is a classic one too. So I would say don't expect anything bigger than sort of a 10% swing in open rates. It would be unrealistic otherwise. When we get into the back end stuff, like organizing your audience, cleaning your audience, and targeting segments within that audience, if your audience is big enough and you've got the time to do that, then we start to see huge game-changing changes in engagement, open rates, click rates, the whole smorgasbord. So there we might expect, I mean, we've seen lists go from 10% open rates to 40% open rates, and there's nothing magic about that. It's not because we have started writing their subject lines, as much as we'd love to say that. It's because we have gotten rid of the people who never open their emails. We've just cleansed them. We've cleaned the list. And so doing that is inevitably going to improve your open rate. And there's a big distinction here, Jamie, because I'm not saying that you're going to get more opens by cleaning your list or targeting segments. There isn't going to be a greater number of people opening your email, but as a proportion of the amount of people that you send the email to, you're going to get more of them opening it. And that's what we talk about. I should have clarified that earlier, but that's what we're talking about when we say open rate. It's not the number of opens, it's the percentage of opens from the people you send it to, which might be obvious to some people, but it means when we clean the list, for example, and we get rid of all those unengaged contacts, it doesn't mean we're getting extra opens. In the long run, we might. In the short term, it's, we're just getting nicer numbers to look at. And those do have an effect on deliverability. And so I'm going down another rabbit hole here.
No, it's fine, because I was going to ask you about deliverability, because we haven't got tons of time left in this one. But if we think about how important all engagement metrics are, but specifically for this episode, open rates, what is the connection between good or bad open rates and deliverability? And what do we mean when we say deliverability as well?
Deliverability is the likelihood of your email reaching the primary inbox, not the spam folder or the promotions folder or anything like that. So that's what we refer to when we talk about deliverability. Some descriptions of it will say that it's purely a technical thing, like how many of your emails are bouncing and how many aren't. But what we want to talk about is how likely are you to get in front of the people that you're sending your email to. So poor deliverability would mean going into spam all the time. The relationship between deliverability, it's a bit of a mouthful, and open rates it's a bit of a chicken and the egg, because poor open rates can impact deliverability and poor deliverability can impact open rates. So you can end up in a bit of a vicious cycle. Ultimately, Gmail and Yahoo and Apple Mail and all of those email servers want to serve their users with the most interesting and relevant content to them. And they use opens as a signal of how interesting something is, and also as a measure for how unlikely it is to be spam. If you have high open rates, the likelihood is that you're not sending out rubbish, salesy messages. So yes, we want our open rates to be higher, because if a higher proportion of our recipients are opening our emails, we're more likely to have good deliverability. And that means as we grow our list and we scale, and maybe now and again we do want to sell something, we're going to get in front of people. So it's super important.
Nice. Okay. We'll leave that one where it is, because deliverability is certainly probably 5 whole episodes on their own. And we'll be kind to you. We won't do those 5 episodes in a row because it's a heavy subject. Okay, so I want to do a hot take. We'll try and do one of these in every episode. And the hot take for this one, what's one thing someone can do or start to do today to improve their open rates? We'll do one each.
We'd have to do it at the same time this time.
No, because I knew last time that we might get it at the same time. that we would get the same thing, but this time I'm not sure because there's so many different things that you can do.
Okay, I think you're going to steal mine, but I've got a backup.
Okay, do you want me to go first?
Go on.
If I had to pick one thing that you could start to do today, I think start to understand who is on your list and start to add people that fit the right kind of demographic for your newsletter. Build it in a meaningful way. So I didn't really describe that very eloquently, but understanding your audience and then adding more of those people onto your list will mean your open rates will be better.
Okay. Yeah.
Did I steal yours?
No, sort of. I was going to go for clean your audience, which is kind of different. So take your existing audience, and every single email service provider will have the option to segment those recipients who have never opened your emails before. And I promise you, it will be at least 25% of your list. It will probably be nearer to about 40%. And you'll look at them and you'll think, I cannot believe, you might even look at individual names and you go, I can't believe Sarah hasn't read a single email that I've ever sent her. Set the filter for something like the last 6 months, depending on how frequently you send emails, or at least the last 5 campaigns that you've sent. You will find about 30% of your list have never opened any of them, and just get rid of them. Just get rid of them. It feels a little bit painful and counterintuitive. It will improve everything about your emails.
Nice. Okay, cool. There's your 2 hot takes. Understand your audience and grow it in a meaningful way. And then James came up with clean your list. Archive those that are not opening your emails, because they're probably costing you extra money as well, right, in subscription fees for the platform. So,
and maybe send them like a passive-aggressive letter in the post.
Yeah, like, fuck you, open my emails. Something like that.
Exactly.
That works. We do that for clients all the time, right? We call that the fuck
services.
you letter.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty much us. I'm going to try this. There we go. That's us, www.theinbox.club. As you know, we're an email marketing agency specializing in B2B. I'm Jamie and he's James. Everyone gets that confused.
It's so salesy. Jamie's the aggressive salesman.
I'm the salesman for the agency. I've got to plug the agency. Otherwise, what we do, we're just having a nice time chatting, giving away value. That's great. But
I'm only here for the vibes.
Yeah, we're just here for the vibes. This is a vibes only podcast. That's why we talk about congas and what was it we spoke about today?
Oh, what haven't we talked about? Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Cool. Well, catch you next time. Thanks for listening.
All right. Cheers.